Jessica Martinez stared at the certified letter in disbelief, her hands trembling as she read the invoice for $52,000. The letterhead bore her brother-in-law's law firm logo, and the demand was crystal clear. Payment for her sister Amanda's totaled BMW, allegedly caused by Jessica's negligent driving 6 months ago. What made this particularly cruel was the timing. She'd received this bombshell exactly 1 week after discovering her entire family had celebrated Christmas without her, posting photos all over social media while she sat alone in her apartment. The accident had happened during what was supposed to be a routine family dinner in July. Jessica had borrowed Amanda's car to pick up dessert from the bakery, something she'd done countless times before. A drunk driver had run a red light and slammed into the passenger side while Jessica waited at an intersection. The police report clearly stated she wasn't at fault, and she'd even spent 3 days in the hospital with a concussion and broken ribs. Amanda had seemed understanding at the time, her insurance handling everything while Jessica recovered. But apparently, understanding had an expiration date. According to the legal document, Amanda's insurance had only covered $38,000 of the BMW's value, leaving a gap that the family now expected Jessica to fill. The letter claimed that since Jessica was driving, she bore responsibility for the remaining cost, despite the other driver being convicted of DUI and sentenced to jail time. Jessica's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Hope you understand this is just business, honey. Family is family, but money is money." The casual tone made her stomach turn. This was the same woman who'd helped plan Amanda's elaborate Christmas celebration, complete with a gift exchange that Jessica only learned about through her cousin's Instagram stories. The exclusion from Christmas hadn't been an oversight, it had been deliberate. When Jessica had called her mother on Christmas Eve asking about plans, she'd been told the family was keeping it small this year, and that Jessica should focus on her own healing. Meanwhile, 23 family members had gathered at Amanda's house, the same house where Jessica had helped hang Christmas lights just 2 years ago when she was still the favored daughter. Jessica set the invoice down and walked to her laptop. As a freelance graphic designer, she'd been struggling financially since the accident, unable to work at full capacity while dealing with her injuries and the emotional trauma. $52,000 might as well have been 52 million. She pulled up her bank account, $837. Her savings had been depleted by medical bills that insurance hadn't covered and lost income during her recovery. Her phone rang. Amanda's name flashed on the screen, but Jessica let it go to voicemail. She wasn't ready to hear whatever justification her sister had prepared. Instead, she opened her computer and began researching. If her family wanted to play legal games, she'd make sure she understood the rules. What she discovered in the next hour would change everything, and give her the ammunition she needed to turn this situation completely around. The first thing Jessica uncovered was that Amanda's insurance policy included a provision for depreciation gaps, something that should have covered the remaining balance on the BMW. She screenshot the policy details, which Amanda had shared with her months ago during a casual conversation about insurance rates. The gap coverage was clearly listed, meaning Amanda had likely already been compensated for the full value of the vehicle. Next, she pulled up the police report from the accident. Officer Rodriguez had been thorough in his documentation, noting not only that the drunk driver was at fault, but also that Jessica had been following all traffic laws and hadn't been using her phone or engaging in any distracting behavior. The other driver's blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit, and witness statements corroborated that he'd blown through the red light at excessive speed. But the most interesting discovery came when Jessica searched public records for her brother-in-law Marcus's law firm. She found several complaints filed with the State Bar Association, including one recent case where he'd been censured for attempting to collect damages from parties not legally liable. It appeared that pressuring family members into paying for accidents they didn't cause was becoming something of a pattern for Marcus. Jessica's phone buzzed again, another text from her mother. Marcus says you have 30 days to respond to the invoice. We don't want this to get ugly, sweetie. The passive-aggressive tone was typical of her mother's communication style, always couching demands in false concern. Jessica deleted the message without responding. She spent the next 2 hours documenting everything. Screenshots of the family Christmas photos that had excluded her, copies of text messages where she'd been lied to about the celebration being small, and evidence of Amanda's full insurance coverage. She also found something else interesting. Amanda had posted about receiving a surprise insurance payout on her private Facebook page just 2 weeks after the accident, celebrating the check with dinner at an expensive restaurant. The picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't about recovering legitimate costs. This was about Amanda and Marcus seeing an opportunity to make money off Jessica's misfortune while simultaneously pushing her out of the family. The Christmas exclusion hadn't been separate from the invoice. It had been part of a calculated plan to isolate her and make her more vulnerable to their financial demands. Jessica opened a new document and began typing. If they wanted to play hardball, she was ready to swing back. Her years of dealing with difficult clients as a freelancer had taught her how to be thorough, persistent, and strategic. She started with a formal response to the invoice, but that was just the beginning of what would become a comprehensive campaign to expose the truth and protect herself. Armed with evidence of the insurance fraud and documentation of her family's cruel treatment, Jessica crafted a detailed response that dismantled every claim in Marcus's invoice. She cited the police report, attached the insurance policy showing gap coverage, and included timestamps proving Amanda had already been fully compensated. But she didn't stop there. She also documented the pattern of financial manipulation and emotional abuse that had culminated in her Christmas exclusion. The response letter was professional but devastating, pointing out that attempting to collect money from someone not legally liable could constitute extortion, especially when done by a licensed attorney who should know better. She copied the State Bar Association on the correspondence and sent copies to Amanda's insurance company, noting the potential fraud in claiming compensation twice for the same loss. Within hours of sending her response, her phone exploded with calls and texts from family members. Her mother called 6 times in a row, finally leaving a voicemail that was equal parts outrage and panic. "Jessica, what have you done? Marcus is furious and Amanda is crying. We need to talk about this like adults." Her uncle Robert, who'd been at the Christmas celebration she'd been excluded from, sent a lengthy text trying to mediate. "Maybe we can work out a payment plan that's more manageable for you." Even her teenage nephew reached out, apparently having been recruited to guilt her into compliance. "Aunt Jess, why are you being so mean to Mom? She's really upset." But Jessica was done being manipulated. She'd spent years being the family peacekeeper, always apologizing first and backing down from conflicts to maintain harmony. The Christmas exclusion had shown her exactly where she stood in their priorities, and the fraudulent invoice had revealed their true character. She turned off her phone and spent the evening researching her next moves. The most satisfying discovery came when she found that Marcus's law firm had a prominent ethics hotline advertised on their website, encouraging clients to report any misconduct. She wondered how many potential clients would feel about hearing a lawyer who tried to extort his own family members. She also learned that Amanda's insurance company took fraud very seriously and had a dedicated investigation unit for exactly these kinds of situations. Jessica spent the weekend gathering additional evidence and preparing her counterattack. She wouldn't just defend herself, she'd go on the offense, exposing the entire scheme and making sure there were real consequences for their behavior. By Monday morning, Jessica had filed a formal complaint with the State Bar Association against Marcus, complete with documentation of his attempt to collect money from someone with no legal liability. She'd also contacted Amanda's insurance company to report the suspected double-dipping on the BMW payout. But her most strategic move was reaching out to her cousin Maria, who'd posted those Christmas photos that had revealed the family's deception. Maria had always been the family gossip, someone who thrived on drama and had no loyalty to anyone. Jessica knew that if she played this right, Maria would become an unwitting ally in exposing the truth. She called Maria, and after some careful conversation, learned that Amanda had indeed bragged about getting one over on the insurance company, and that Marcus had openly discussed his plan to squeeze Jessica for whatever she's worth. More importantly, Maria revealed that the Christmas exclusion had been Amanda's idea, sold to the family as protecting Jessica's feelings, while she dealt with the consequences of her careless driving. The manipulation ran deeper than Jessica had imagined. Amanda had rewritten the narrative of the accident to make Jessica appear at fault, despite the police report and witness statements clearly showing otherwise. Armed with this information, Jessica made another strategic decision. She created a detailed timeline of events, from the accident through the fraudulent invoice, and shared it with several key family members who hadn't been part of the Christmas conspiracy. Her Aunt Patricia, her father's sister who lived across the country, was appalled when she learned the truth. Patricia had been told that Jessica was going through a difficult time and preferred to be alone for the holidays. When she saw the evidence of the insurance fraud and learned about the attempted extortion, she immediately called other family members to share what she'd discovered. The family narrative began to crack as more people learned the truth about what had really happened. Within days, the family dynamic had shifted completely. Jessica's phone was now ringing with calls from relatives who wanted to apologize for being misled and to offer their support. Her grandmother, the family matriarch who commanded respect from everyone, called Amanda directly and demanded an explanation for her behavior. The dominoes continued to fall as Jessica's methodical approach paid dividends. Marcus received an official inquiry from the State Bar Association, requiring him to respond to the ethics complaint within 30 days. Amanda's insurance company opened a fraud investigation, freezing any future claims pending their review. Most satisfying of all, several family members who'd attended the Christmas celebration were now publicly supporting Jessica and condemning Amanda's actions. But Jessica wasn't finished. She'd learned that going on defense wasn't enough to prevent future manipulation. She needed to ensure there were lasting consequences for their behavior. Her next move would be the most public and the most devastating, designed to make sure Amanda and Marcus thought twice before trying to manipulate anyone else in the family. Jessica's breakthrough came when she discovered that Marcus's law firm was up for a prestigious community award, nominated by the local Chamber of Commerce for their ethical business practices and community involvement. The irony was too perfect to ignore. She spent an evening crafting a detailed letter to the Chamber of Commerce, complete with documentation of Marcus's attempt to extort money from a family member who was clearly not liable for the debt he was trying to collect. The letter was professional and factual, focusing on the ethics violation rather than the personal family drama. She included copies of the police report, insurance documentation, and Marcus's fraudulent invoice, letting the facts speak for themselves. She also noted that a licensed attorney attempting to collect money through intimidation and false legal claims represented exactly the kind of unethical behavior the Chamber's award was supposed to recognize the absence of. Meanwhile, Amanda's insurance fraud investigation was progressing rapidly. The company's investigators had discovered not only the gap coverage that should have paid the remaining balance, but also evidence that Amanda had inflated repair estimates before the accident to increase the total payout. What had started as a potential double billing situation was evolving into a more serious case of insurance fraud. Jessica's Aunt Patricia had become an unexpected ally in holding the family accountable. As someone with decades of experience in corporate management, Patricia understood the seriousness of Marcus's ethical violations and Amanda's insurance fraud. She'd begun reaching out to other family members, not to take sides in drama, but to ensure everyone understood the legal implications of what had happened. The family Christmas photos that had once been a source of pain for Jessica were now working in her favor. Patricia had used them to create a timeline showing how the family had deliberately excluded Jessica while secretly planning to extort money from her. The visual evidence of their deception was more powerful than any explanation could have been. Jessica's cousin Maria, meanwhile, had become increasingly uncomfortable as she realized her gossip had helped expose serious criminal behavior. She'd started sharing more details about conversations she'd overheard, including Amanda's admission that she'd chosen to exclude Jessica from Christmas specifically to make her more emotionally vulnerable to the financial demands. The psychological manipulation involved in the scheme was becoming clear. The Christmas exclusion hadn't been coincidental. It had been a calculated move to isolate Jessica from family support before hitting her with the fraudulent invoice. Amanda had counted on Jessica being too hurt and alone to mount an effective defense. But Jessica's methodical response had turned their strategy against them. Instead of becoming isolated and vulnerable, she'd become focused and strategic, using their own actions as evidence of their character and intentions. The State Bar Association's investigation into Marcus moved quickly once they realized the seriousness of the allegations. Attempting to collect money from parties not legally liable was a clear violation of professional ethics, made worse by the family relationship that created additional opportunities for coercion. Marcus was required to attend a formal hearing and faced potential suspension of his license. Amanda's situation was even more serious. Insurance fraud was a felony, and the investigators had uncovered evidence of a pattern of questionable claims dating back several years. What had started as an attempt to squeeze extra money out of Jessica had exposed a much larger scheme that could result in criminal charges. The community award that Marcus's firm had been nominated for was quietly withdrawn after the Chamber of Commerce reviewed the documentation Jessica had provided. The local legal community was small, and word spread quickly about the ethics investigation and fraud allegations. Jessica's family members who had supported the Christmas exclusion were now scrambling to distance themselves from Amanda and Marcus. Her mother, who had initially defended the invoice as just business, was now claiming she'd been misled about the legal situation and hadn't understood what was being asked of Jessica. But Jessica remembered every text message, every casual dismissal of her concerns, and every instance where her family had chosen Amanda's version of events over the documented facts. Forgiveness might come eventually, but trust would have to be rebuilt through actions, not words. The most satisfying moment came when Jessica received a formal letter from Marcus's law firm, not from Marcus himself, but from his senior partner, withdrawing the invoice and apologizing for any misunderstanding about Jessica's liability. The letter carefully avoided admitting wrongdoing while making it clear that no payment would be sought from Jessica for any accident-related costs. Amanda sent her own message, a rambling text that managed to be both an apology and an attempt to justify her actions. She claimed she'd been stressed about money and had listened to bad advice from Marcus. She asked if they could put this behind us and move forward as a family, apparently still not understanding the magnitude of what she'd done. Jessica didn't respond to either message immediately. She'd learned the value of taking time to think strategically rather than reacting emotionally. Her methodical approach had worked perfectly so far, and she wasn't about to abandon it now by rushing into premature reconciliation. Instead, she focused on documenting the resolution for her records. The withdrawn invoice, the ethics investigation, the fraud case, and the pattern of family manipulation were all carefully filed away. She'd learned that sometimes the best defense was a well-organized offense, and she wanted to be prepared if anyone ever tried to manipulate her again. Her Aunt Patricia called to check on her and to share an update. Several family members were planning their own Christmas celebration for the coming year, one that would specifically include Jessica and exclude anyone who had participated in the manipulation scheme. The family dynamics were reshuffling, with clear consequences for those who had chosen deception over honesty. Jessica realized she felt lighter than she had in months. The weight of trying to maintain relationships with people who were willing to hurt her for money had been lifted. She was surrounded by family members who genuinely cared about her, and she'd proven to herself that she could stand up to manipulation and fraud. As the dust settled from her comprehensive response to the fraudulent invoice, Jessica found herself in an unexpectedly strong position. The family members who truly mattered had rallied to her support, while those who had participated in the scheme were facing real consequences for their actions. Marcus's law license was under review. Amanda was dealing with a criminal fraud investigation, and their reputations in both the family and the community had been permanently damaged. The insurance company's investigation had uncovered evidence of systematic fraud going back 3 years, involving inflated claims and false documentation on multiple vehicles. Amanda was facing potential felony charges and would likely be required to pay substantial restitution to the insurance company. The surprise payout she'd celebrated on social media was now evidence in a criminal case. Jessica's mother made several attempts to arrange a family meeting to work things out, but Jessica declined. She'd learned that some people viewed forgiveness as permission to repeat harmful behavior, and she wasn't interested in providing that permission. Instead, she focused on strengthening relationships with family members who had proven their character during the crisis. Her grandmother, now in her 80s, had lived through enough family drama to recognize manipulation when she saw it. She'd cut off contact with Amanda and Marcus entirely, telling other family members that she was too old to waste time on people who hurt their own family for money. Her support meant more to Jessica than any apology from those who had wronged her. The legal consequences continued to unfold over the following months. Marcus's ethics hearing resulted in a 6-month suspension of his law license and mandatory ethics training. His law firm's reputation suffered significantly, with several clients leaving after learning about his attempt to extort money from a family member who wasn't legally liable. Amanda's case was more serious. The insurance fraud investigation had uncovered a pattern of behavior that prosecutors couldn't ignore. She ultimately pleaded guilty to multiple counts of insurance fraud and was sentenced to 2 years of probation, community service, and restitution of over $40,000 to the insurance company. The criminal conviction meant Amanda also faced a civil lawsuit from the insurance company, seeking additional damages and legal fees. The BMW she'd tried to make Jessica pay for was ultimately costing Amanda far more than its original value, a perfect example of how greed and manipulation could backfire spectacularly. Jessica's methodical documentation and strategic response had protected not just herself, but potentially other victims of Amanda and Marcus's schemes. The insurance company used evidence from Jessica's case to investigate other suspicious claims, uncovering additional fraud that might have otherwise gone undetected. The family Christmas celebration that had started this entire ordeal was now a distant memory, replaced by new traditions that reflected the family's true values. Jessica found herself at the center of a smaller but more genuine family circle, surrounded by people who had proven their loyalty when it mattered most. Her relationship with her mother remained strained, but Jessica had made peace with that reality. Some bridges were worth burning if they led to people who would hurt you for money. She'd learned to value character over familial obligation, and her life was better for it. As Jessica looked back on the experience a year later, she realized that the fraudulent invoice had actually been a gift in disguise. It had revealed the true character of people she'd spent years trying to please, while also showing her the strength of relationships with family members who genuinely cared about her well-being. The $52,000 invoice that had once seemed like a devastating attack had ultimately cost Amanda and Marcus far more than they'd ever tried to collect from Jessica. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was simply refusing to be a victim and holding people accountable for their actions. Jessica had learned that she didn't need to tolerate manipulation and abuse simply because it came from family members. She discovered her own strength and the value of surrounding herself with people who supported her rather than exploited her. The Christmas she'd been excluded from had been the last Christmas she'd spend feeling unwanted and undervalued. The story had come full circle, from a moment of devastating betrayal to a position of strength and authentic relationships. Jessica's methodical response to her family's manipulation had not only protected her financially and legally, but had also freed her from toxic relationships that had been holding her back for years. In the end, the greatest victory wasn't the withdrawn invoice or the legal consequences for Amanda and Marcus. It was Jessica's realization that she deserved better treatment and had the power to demand it. She'd transformed from a victim of manipulation into someone who refused to tolerate abuse, regardless of its source. The family gatherings she attended now were filled with genuine warmth and support, a stark contrast to the obligation and tension that had characterized previous holidays. She'd traded quantity of family relationships for quality, and discovered that she was much happier with people who actually valued her presence rather than just tolerating it. Jessica's story had become something of a legend in her extended family, a cautionary tale about the consequences of greed and manipulation. But for Jessica herself, it was simply the beginning of a new chapter where she prioritized her own well-being and surrounded herself with people who genuinely cared about her happiness and success.